Damascus gave Paul a different experience and said, Saul, I realize you've been trying your best, but your best has been wrong. And I'm going to show you a new way. And so Saul became Paul and began to really be one of the most prolific writers in the history of the world, and especially the most prolific when it came to Scripture. And one of those books that he wrote was Ephesians. And in that, Paul, he's always been great. He's been the most humble of disciples or apostles, and he's the first to tell you that he was the most humble. And the thing about Paul, really, was that he was one of those guys that he just ran and did and worked as hard as he could and did as much as he could and thought he was right and just plugged on ahead. But then he comes to this place in his ministry where he begins to say, I think what Tamara read said, I urge. In a different version, it says, I beg you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So, Paul, who did everything he could to kind of stamp out Christianity, God came along, gave him a new vision, and along the way, learning every time and being able to now in his journey say, you know what? I've been wrong, but I was trying my best. But he was willing to learn from people sitting around a table like this. And so that's my hope for tonight, is that no matter how you came in, what your opinion was when you came in, that you'll walk away having learned from someone sitting around your table tonight. Maybe everybody sitting around your table tonight. So, Ephesus was a melting pot. This is from the letter that I sent, and so I'm just going to start reading some of that. And then we'll have a proposal, and then some time for clarification, questions for clarification, and then we'll move forward with being able to discuss. So, Ephesus was a melting pot of different ethnicities, cultures, and religions. And this diversity often led to divisions and conflicts, as you can imagine. Within the church, this diversity included Jewish and Gentile believers who had distinct cultural and religious backgrounds. Paul saw the need to address potential divisions and to promote unity among believers of different backgrounds. Sierra Vista, I believe, has much in common with the church in Ephesus. We too have a diversity of thought and some very distinctive cultural and doctrinal differences. If you paid attention to the numbers that I presented in this, you saw that about 46 people responded to the trustees. And if you saw about 23 felt one way, and about 23 felt the other way. And so, right there, you're already seeing this very distinctive diversity of thought and doctrinal differences. Through Paul's letter to the Ephesians, God is challenging us, I believe, to make every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit. This unity in the body of Christ reflects the very nature of God. Ephesians declares that there is one body and one Spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father of all. Our unity is grounded in these foundational truths, and it's through our collective commitment to these truths that we grow together as the body of Christ. But maintaining unity requires effort and intentionality. It involves accepting and respecting our unique differences, forgiving as Christ forgave us, and striving to live in harmony. I've spoken often about drawing lines in the sand, and that God has taught me over the years that there do have to be lines, but has encouraged me to try to extend those lines as far out as possible to include as many people as possible. So it involves accepting and respecting unique differences, forgiving as Christ forgave, and striving to live in harmony, like I said. Our Board of Trustees was tasked with drafting a policy for our church that will address the changes in the United Methodist Church's Book of Discipline, while maintaining unity in our church as much as possible. To help in this process, we encourage you to share your ideas, hopes, and concerns in a loving, respectful way, and you all did. Thank you so much for that. And again, we received roughly 46 responses. Some of these were signed as couples, but we listed those below the general breakdown. And you saw that breakdown, and I went over that just a moment ago. After discussing the responses and trying to determine the major issues that were lifted, it became apparent to many of us that there were some primary issues on either side of the fence. One primary issue was the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of the usage of our buildings being the primary concern for one side. And the primary concern to the other side was adopting a policy that intentionally excluded one group of people from the life of the church was something they didn't feel that we could in good faith move forward as a church together in that way. Is that making sense, what I'm sharing right now? Okay. So after much conversation, many prayers, and tears, honestly, the solution that the trustees believe best addresses the concerns, does the least amount of damage, is to raise the requirements for weddings in our church across the board. Now, to be clear, we knew from the very beginning that we were not going to make everybody happy. In fact, we were pretty certain that we would not make anybody happy. Honestly. But we also felt confident and hopeful that God would give us a way that we could address the primary concerns of both kinds of sides of the issue without crossing the lines of those two major issues. I don't know if that's making sense, but we'll continue to move forward. So we are proposing that only members of our church who are actively involved through their prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness be allowed to wed in our facilities. In addition, they must be a member for at least 1 year prior to scheduling their wedding. This includes the children and grandchildren of our current members, meaning that if the children and grandchildren are not currently living here and members here, but are living elsewhere, then they can be married in our church as long as they are actively involved in supporting a church where they are currently living. So this policy, we believe, this policy protects and even elevates the sanctity of marriage by drawing firm lines and requirements, and yet does not exclude any one group. And hopefully it stays off the fears that some have that outside interests will seek to use our church as a platform, which we believe is very unlikely as it is, but even if they chose to do that, this staves that off. So, are there any questions of clarification about that policy and about how we arrived at that policy? You'll have an opportunity to share in your table your reactions to that, your thoughts, general thoughts about that. But right now we're just asking for clarification on how we arrived at that, clarification on different points of the policy and what that might look like. I'll give you an opportunity to just think about it if you have any questions. But I will address one that's already come up, and that is there are some people in our congregation who have been faithfully attending here for years, who support the church, and who are not members, who feel like this policy is a little bit exclusive to them. It's not just, it's exclusive for them. And my response to this is, but that is a choice that they have made, and they can change that choice anytime. So, and in fact, I believe that those folks who've been faithfully participating in our church and just haven't checked the box of being a member, that the trustees and the pastoral staff could say, well, you have been a member in everything but in name only, and so we can make an exception for that particular instance. Does that make sense? Because it's not about trying to only get members or anything, but it's about people who are faithful And we had to have some sort of way to put that there. Okay, are there other points of clarification? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is this policy now already in effect, or is it still in deliberation?
Is this policy now currently in effect, or is it still in deliberation? It is not in effect. That's why we're having this time tonight. It has been proposed by the trustees, and the next step is for it to be presented to the church council, and the church council will or will not adopt it. And so that's what this time tonight is helping the church council to understand more. Yes. The current policy is it's more about how often do you need to meet with the pastor. There's no policy for members. There's different charges for members versus non-members. So the current policy is that anybody can be wed here. It's just they will be charged differently, and they have to meet with the pastor a certain amount of times or not. And those kinds of policies.
How would this affect a couple who wanted to get married, who is one member is very active, and the other one is either not a member or has not been active in church? How would that affect that marriage?
So it's our understanding as trustees that at least one of the couple have to be a member, and that's what I wouldn't necessarily they could still be married here. Yes, I mean one person has to have been here for a year, actively involved. And please correct me if I'm wrong, trustees, but that was my understanding. Are there other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe slow, but did you say that if a grandparent or a parent or some family member had been members of this forever, and one of the couples was very active in a church elsewhere, but wished to get married here, that if they were active in a church elsewhere, that would make them able to get married here?
Yes. If the parent or grandparent are actively in support of the church.
So far, all the discussion is in regard to marriage ceremonies. Has there been any discussion about funeral services?
No, there's not been any discussion on funeral services. It's not my understanding at this point that funeral services have ever been a point of contention for folks.
Do we have plenty of church council members here who can hear this discussion and know kind of what the feeling of the church is?
If you're on church council, would you please stand? So, I believe so. Okay.
Some of you are old enough to remember that I was the wedding director for 9 years. One year we had 15 weddings before the 1st of August. Just blink your eyes if you think I didn't want to commit suicide. But we had a lot of non-member weddings, and the only trouble weddings we had were non-members. The only. And a lot of you, I did your children, and I did a lot of other. I can tell you stories even without tequila.
I think Bill brought up an excellent idea, and I would like to go one step further. What about the views, especially with the church council, about columbarium, only church members? Or is it going to be open as we are for some of the marriages? Like if Marty wanted to come home, St. Angelo is home. If she wanted to come to this church, would she be able to, even though she is not a church member?
So there is an opportunity towards the end of our time tonight to kind of write down some hopes for church council to hear. And it's specifically, we were kind of talking about this specific policy. But if there are other things like that, we would love for you to write those down so that can be passed to church council and then also to trustees.
Because obviously there are people here who have other thoughts as builders. So we need to address those as well.
Yes, and we hope to, and that's why we will have that opportunity for you to. Okay.
How are they going to define active in the church?
Well, that's going to be mainly pastoral. One thing that we talked about with the trustees that we could not put solidly in this was that they would have to meet with the senior pastor in order for the senior pastor to be able to determine the supportive and active in the church.
One of the things that I heard our group talking about here was one of the things people love about our church is outreach. And I'm not sure how well this addresses that perspective of outreach for non-members. And a separate discussion, Nancy and I visited East Germany, and there the churches, if you're not a member, you cannot get married in a church in East Germany. And to be a member, you have to pay a tax to the state. And so we were schooled on people become members, get married in the church, I don't know if they premeditated a year or what the rules were, and then they drift off. So, but I've had, just the thing that stuck in my head is there an opportunity for outreach that we're not addressing?
Correct. Thank you for that. And again, I want to clarify that that was one of the big points that the trustees struggled with, was the idea of weddings as an evangelistic outreach. Because they, at one point in time, that's how I viewed weddings, was couples who are they've gone off to college, they've kind of forgotten what it is to be at church, then they start to get married, and they start to raise a family, and that's when they're starting to come back to church. And so it's a perfect opportunity for them to be married in the church. And that was 15 years ago when that actually happened. Since then, the numbers of weddings in churches has dramatically declined, and it's not because churches are not open to non-member weddings. It's because people are no longer looking to the church to get married. And it may change again in 15, 20 years. And if it does, then I believe that the trustees would need to revisit this. But currently, how many weddings have we done? We've done 5 weddings in 8 years or something, or 8 years, 8 weddings in 5 years, something. None since I've come here in the church. Not a single wedding in the church since I got here. So.
My son and all of their friends have not gotten married in the church. They got married at a venue. So does this policy, so the pastor's discretion, could you marry one of my children in a different venue that's not in the church?
Yeah, it's always the pastor's discretion outside. This is specifically for our birthdays. Yes, just for our birthdays.
This does not reference at pastor's discretion when you're talking about making that determination. It needs to be listed in there. You don't need to line that out if that's going to be in here. It needs to be there.
Maybe with the senior pastor.
Not understood.
Okay. Okay. So that needs to be included in the policy that comes to the church council. The part about the pastors, meeting with the senior pastor to determine the eligibility of that they've been actively supportive of the church through their prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, at least for the last year. So that was the part that wasn't included, that he wanted that to be written down and put in before it's presented. But the pastor can't look at it and say, oh, you haven't joined the church yet? I'm just going to go ahead and say that that's fine. I'm going to go here and I'll come to you.
Just the one thing we noticed whenever she asked if one member was active and one member is not, that currently states that they are active, and you said it is, as long as one is. I don't know if you just want to change that wording, but just from what we read, it says they, not one.
Right, so I think the word massaging there is difficult when you, because on one side, here at the church, if the couple is here at the church, only one has to be a member and actually involved. But when it comes to like children or grandchildren, if they are living elsewhere, we might need to take out the word couple, but it's trying to figure out that at least the one who's coming in to be married is actively involved and supportive there. So we will try to massage that out, but everybody understand the description she's interested in?
Already, the pastor has the responsibility when a child is baptized to make sure that they're on the roll here, or if they are not members here, like their grandkids, that they are on the roll of another church where they will be discipled in that congregation. So we already have that responsibility of judging or discerning where they are in the process of their journey. And so this role here is not a new role for us as clergy. And I can tell you, as far as that goes, in 40 years, the people that came that wanted to be married in our congregation and saw our building, who wanted to be married there, they saw it as a venue like the country club. They didn't see it. If they weren't visiting and already getting involved, they weren't ever coming back. And I never saw them again.
And there are a few that came as a result of being married here. There are a few, but not as many anymore.
We joined about 6 years ago, and so as newer members coming in or wanting to join, where would you find the policies of our church to review those? And then two, how often are policies reviewed?
So this, the current wedding policy is on the website. And go to weddings and you can download that there. So as far as all church policies, there's no landing space for those currently that I know of, unless I'm not correct in that. So, but we do have a time for SB 101 where we discuss some things, but I think we do need to have a landing space. But we don't have other, there are policies for, so we do need to be able to line them out and put and try to figure out. Just some are robust, some are so.
What kind of they are available if you want to know about a specific policy? There are no hidden policies, correct?
Well, there are no hidden policies. There may be lost policies.
There's a distinction between policy and, what the whole Methodist church, and that's easy to find. I'm not sure if your question was directed about church policy itself or the church doctrine. Church policy.
The elephant in the room, if we have a member, an active member that is a homosexual, and they have been a member their whole life for over a year, and they want to be married to their partner in this church, is that going to be spelled out, or is it just going to say, okay, you can have it here, but we don't have a pastor to officiate?
The trustees did discuss some of that, and what we've come to is currently we know of just a few possibilities for that to happen, to arise, and we didn't necessarily see that as likely in the immediate future, and that it would be something that we would have to kind of crossed that bridge when it came, but that this was giving us enough coverage for now to be able to move forward until we know better when that situation arises, if and when that situation arises. And that's as honest of an answer as I can give to you. It's not the best answer, and it was a struggle that the trustees had.
But under this proposed policy, they should be able to put in a member a year.
Yes, she says under this proposed policy they should be able to if they've been a member for a year. So we're getting into some of the part that I think is going to be discussed around the table a little bit better, because it's harder to talk about some of these things when you're looking each other in the eye, and so.
What are our current guidelines if someone who is a member wants to be married here and the local pastor does not wish or is unavailable to conduct that wedding? Can they bring in an outside pastor to conduct a wedding in our facility?
Yes, they can.
Is that
At pastor's discretion. Yeah, at pastor's discretion. And the policy says that the pastor has to approve the person who's coming in to be able to do that. Okay. So, we've gotten to where we are now. We have an opportunity, and I'm going to hand it back over to Tamara to kind of discuss our responses, our reactions, and then be able to share a little bit as well.
All right, so what you're going to do now, this is where some of the hard work comes in, and this is where following this dialogue is extremely important. That we honor each other's time, we honor each other's words. And so you're each going to give 2 minutes to speak and to share your thoughts on this question. I'm going to read it, I'll read it again. What are your thoughts about the proposal, and what would you like the church council to take into consideration? So the first part of the question is, what are your thoughts about the proposal? And the second part of that question is, and what would you like the church council to take into consideration as they think about this policy? So, anybody need to repeat that again? That's kind of hard to see for some of you in the back. Okay, so the first part of the question, what are your thoughts about the proposal? And what would you like the church council to take into consideration? What are your thoughts about the proposal? And what would you like the church council to take into consideration? I would invite you to write your responses on one of those index cards. After we're done with your conversation over this question, we're going to actually have an opportunity to be able to report back to the larger group. So we're going to take a minute of silence to allow you to reflect on your responses. Anybody else need me to read that question again? Are we good? Okay. And does everybody, if you need extra index cards or pencils, let us know. Very good at your table? Okay. Well, let's take a moment of silence. We'll take a minute of silence, and you can reflect on your index card or within your being how you're going to respond to this question. Let's spend some time in silence together. in. If you have the sand timer, go ahead and turn it over, and you've got 2 minutes to share, and then continue passing around to the right. You do not have to share if you do not want to. And once everybody's had a chance to share, if we've still got enough time left, you can go back and share some more. So, but 2 minutes at a time. So let's go ahead and start our conversations together. We're going to now turn to a larger just conversation. And first of all, y'all, this is hard. Is this hard? Yes, it is hard. And I just applaud you for being here, for engaging. And this is not a perfect process. This proposal is not a perfect proposal. If you can find one and guarantee it's going to be perfect, then I would invite you to let us know what that is. But for a church this size, it's not going to be perfect. And so our hope is that you've had a chance to share around your table your own thoughts, that you've recorded it on cards, and that we'll collect those cards if you want us to pass those on to church council. And we want a chance for each table to just share kind of the layer of your conversation. So I'm going to take an egg timer. I'm going to steal it from who wants to go first? What table would like to go first? We'll just start with one and just, we'll go right there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to steal your egg timer. And I know you're not going to get everything shared that was shared, but we just want to get a feel. Is that okay with everybody? Are we all like, yes, Tamara, that's okay? Tamara, I still love you after all of this. Oh, wait a minute. That sure wasn't loud enough. Tamara, we still love you, even though you made us through this hard conversation. And you love Pastor Kyle, and you love the trustees, and you love the leadership of this church. All right, here we go. Enough blathering on my part. Here you go.
Okay, the thing we talked about with policy is that maybe we need to look at the word members, and maybe there shouldn't have to be members that be active in the church, and look at the word they, as somebody over there said, maybe one person instead of both of them. And then the other consensus we really had is that we're all here because of Sierra Vista and what Sierra Vista is, and not what the policies are. And unless that changes what Sierra Vista is, then we don't think we're going to have any issues.
We are table 2. Our table was okay with the basic policy as proposed with the discussed verbiage corrections that we talked about, clarifications, and we talked about couples, who is that, how do you define active? Talk with, okay. I do that. Okay. Things we also reflected on. We had a split table on our feelings about permitting same-sex marriages in the sanctuary. Everyone at the table wanted to affirm personal choices, but some felt that meant that same-sex marriages should be permitted to promote inclusivity, while others felt that this was against biblical principles. We also had a suggestion that we have an anonymous church-wide vote. No grumbling loud, no grumbling loud. Is there any turn to take that one? Yeah, thank you. Y'all go next.
So, a couple of our folks were saying we need to get more scriptural input about homosexuality. Maybe a sermon series on that. We want our church to be welcoming. We want to honor and follow the Word of God. That Christian values are what's most important. That the policy values the actual actions of members, and it values the individual who is serious about following Christ. And then a question about, with grandchildren, do they have to be part of any church or the United Methodist Church?
At our table, we had a lot of different opinions, and really pretty far apart sometimes. But the good thing was we managed to sit here and listen to each other. And actually, I think we'll walk away feeling okay, even with the differences in opinions. So the hope for us is that if we can do that at a small table, we can do it in our entire congregation. We did think when we looked at the policy itself that we would feel better with a better definitions about what it means to be actively involved. We think that, I don't know whether you want to put numbers on it, how you want to do it, but we felt that was kind of gray. What is active? And then we also felt, what is service? How do you define that? So maybe a little more information or a little more thought about giving some guidance for whoever has to sit in that position and make decisions. The one last question that we had, and it's a very specific one, and it may be that we didn't hear some of the things that were said, but we ended up with a question very specific. Will the senior pastor overrule any same-sex marriage in this sanctuary? Would that eventually, when the issue gets to the senior pastor and he's looking at the couple or talking with them, would that be a point where a same-sex marriage would be overruled? That comes from the table, just a question.
I think that's a question you might want to write down for church council to consider. All right, y'all are up next.
We had a very mixed table. Several different bold opinions were expressed. What I thought was the most neat was between our several Baptist and Lutheran and Methodist, we united at the end that we work together on the same team. A couple of points that came out was that, yes, the United Methodists have a large umbrella table that we're under, and we all love that about Methodism. It's not about who can sit in the pews. We're all sinners. And if you don't think you are, then you need to be in the front row. The conversation gets lost about this being inclusive or exclusive, and a point that was brought up was it's not about excluding anyone or including everyone. It's about the act of God ordaining, blessing, putting his hand on a marriage of a homosexual couple at his altar in our sanctuary. And so once we talked about that, I said, it's almost as if we're lost in peripherals about the issue, when the issue might be as simple as, do you see this as a sin or not? That answers all the rest of the questions. If that is a major sin in your understanding, then maybe you can't get to a place to saying, I approve of that. At the altar of God. It's in our society, it's in our community, it's at our table, it's within our sanctuary, and we're not excluding anybody. We're all the same sin. This sin's no greater or worse than the one we all commit. But the point of difference was we don't ask God at the altar to bless our other sins.
Y'all didn't write anything down. Okay, very good. All right, and this table here, number 10, table 10.
We also agreed that the word active needed to be maybe better defined. We also thought there might be some thought to reduce the 1 year to 6 months. Some young couples might not be willing to wait a year, and they might be active. And 6 months would most likely keep outside interest from coming in. It usually
this table about whether or not a wedding should be allowed to happen. And our comments are, this policy is somewhat vague. I mean, and I think it's probably was written and teaching it that way. The Lord in me reads this as allowing a same-sex marriage if the pastors decided they were willing to do it. I guess we'll have to decide, do we want it vague or do we want it to be a little bit more clear-cut? I don't know the answer, but that was certainly something that we could tell in the way this policy is written. And, there was some discussion about exceptions, but if you're going to have a policy, you need to try to get it clarified as much as you can and not just have other debates, people that can have exceptions. It's a little bit messy. Those are my thoughts.
Well, I was kind of off what Bob said. Some wanted vague, others wanted more concrete. Our table was split right down the middle, I think, maybe more so than one side or the other. Some people think it is too vague. It shakes the foundations of the doctrine, and it ought to be more specific. Others thought that it's a good shot at a policy for the church. We'll see how that works out over time and work with it. And then I think that some people say, well, it's we don't exclude other sinners. So why do we claim that this is a sole exclusive sin? So bottom line is, I think everybody, well, I won't say that. I'm not sure everybody would say that would be in favor of it. But I think everybody appreciates very much the work that the council's done and the discernment that they put into it. And if nothing else, you set up the question for them.
And it's actually the trustees, I was going to put you, trustees were the ones that developed, so just council do that. All right, I'll go next.
Thank you. Our table didn't get quite as specific. We did talk about a few specific things, but the main thing we came away with was that we are one body, one spirit, and our policy as it is now, though vague as our lawyers and judges let us know, allows us to be patient in our understanding and the evolution of our growth, because it's not an instantaneous place that we are going. Today we're here, it's going to take time to get to where we really need to be, but to end up together in unity. And we don't choose to be exclusive, rather than invite all to experience Christian growth within our church family. And that's what Sierra Vista does well, and what we want to continue to do. And then we do have one question that we think church council really needs to consider, is that if we invite all to the communion table, should we restrict marriages to church members, Methodist church members? But that's just a question for further thought.
Let's see, table 5, okay. 9, table 9.
I'll let my members correct me if I misrepresent. I did not hear any strong vocal oppositions or strong positions. I heard some wise points, such as what would Jesus do if a same-sex couple came to him to be married. So not necessarily judging or not necessarily knowing the answer. Also, a point that was made was how the importance of the premarital counseling to whoever the couple is, that to see that they have a good foundation, that's a critical point. And so that's a question that we inserted about a consideration for the counsel as to that kind of language or that inclusion. And that kind of led us a little bit to questions of not probably having a good grasp of the pastor's ability or method of discernment or their role in discerning on selecting or choosing or saying, yes, I will marry you, and those things. And I know that's probably a very gray area, but we lack understanding about how that works. And then another point that was made was if this type of policy wasn't adopted and same-sex was excluded, the emotions or the feelings for parents or grandparents of a child, their child who was being denied, but yet had grown up in the church, mentored in the church. We all knew the person, but yet it was given a no to being able to be married in surrogacy. So that is a sentiment of compassion. And I think my 2 minutes is up.
All right, table number 12.
I think most of our table is in pretty good agreement. We are, one of the things we wrote down, one of the things we talked about policy, I think personally, I believe one of the reasons it's written this way is because the 26-26 or 23-23, when you had that many people, I anticipated it was going to be 40 to 6 or whatever. When it comes out 2023, you really can't get too restrictive on one way or another. We decided that we were receptive to all weddings conducted in a respectful and reverent manner in these facilities. We think the policy is good as suggested. We think there are some things we can do. We need to talk about the members versus not members, whether it's inclusive. Should it be more inclusive? Discretion of the pastors, senior pastor, he is the CEO. We will have CEOs to follow him, hopefully a long time down the road, but we will have other CEOs that we will need to work with. I think this is a living, breathing thing that will not just, it's not a cement now, it's going to be adjusted if necessary down the road if we decide that we may have done something wrong or we may need to be more restricted. But as it is, we feel like it's pretty good. And we also understand that we're all God's children, and we do not want to set ourselves up as a judge in this. So we just want to try to work together and stay together. So. I love you too.
All right, it was a very good. Carl, Judy, you did that for us today. Okay. All right. We were pretty much in agreement, but there was some differences of opinion. On the question, we thought maybe the policy should be tightened up a little bit, and the reason is with the likelihood of a non-traditional marriage being requested, is it worth splitting our church over a specific wording in policy? And some at our table believe members are entitled to all privileges regardless of sexual orientation. Not all agree with the statement above. Members should be careful of what we sanctify. And then last, a union conducted in the church is between the couple and God. Otherwise, they should, we have a little trouble with this one, between the couple and God. Otherwise, if they don't have the belief, they should be encouraged to marry at a secular venue.
We did not have a lot of diversity of thought at our table, surprisingly enough. We were largely in agreement. We thought the policy was well written. We thought it was well crafted. We thought it was well intentioned. Frankly, we were surprised by some questions. We thought the intention was there and plainly written. We feel like we should adopt the policy as written. We feel like the ultimate discretion on whether or not to perform any marriage. We need to remember these policies apply to all weddings, not we're hung up on same sex, right? This should be all weddings at this church. The ultimate discretion lies with the pastoral staff, ultimately the senior pastor. So I feel like that's how it should be.
So we did have some different opinions, but we had a good, respectful conversation, and we also just appreciate the amount of thought and heart that went into making the policy well-intentioned, like he said. Some of the other things that came up were some things I've heard mentioned at other tables that we would like maybe clarification on what actively involved means. And wondering if it's going to be something that's going to be so divisive, should we just say, well, let's just not have weddings at our church? Another thing was that we do want all believers to feel welcome in our church. And then also, in the policy talking about that people should be members, that we would hope that maybe we could encourage people that have been visiting for years and years to become members. So that was our thoughts.
I'm going to make sure I hold this close to my mouth so the camera won't come pull my arm. We just wanted to first kind of thank the council or the trustees for the hard work. This is a hard job, and we know that it wasn't easy. Overall, the policy seemed fine with us. We didn't have a ton of conversation about the underlying same-sex marriage. Ours was to make sure that Sierra Vista stays the way it is and is a loving church that welcomes everyone. So we think, just like Dean said, I think that these policies can be written, will be fluid, and it can change when we need to change it. And but overall, we want to make sure that it doesn't become too rigid, and that we want people that are coming into this church to be able to understand this policy and understand, to be able to read it and kind of know where we're coming from.
I'm really glad these people were at my table. But we didn't really talk like you all. So I'm kind of stuck here. I'm gonna start back here. Okay, so is my 2 minutes up? We know the trustees worked really hard on this, but several of us believe that just following the book of discipline, maybe we didn't need a policy, and that what the discipline says and what we feel what would Jesus do would get us by. And that when we talked about this policy, we worried about the pastors, because we talk about the discretion of the pastors, but if somebody tried to target us for something, would they be liable? So if we just left it into the discipline, maybe we wouldn't go there. And then Sue talked about that we need to be blended without homogenized. And I think that just that we should be loving people and accepting, whether we have a policy or not.
Joy, you did just exactly what you asked.
We probably don't need very much time. So we pretty much were pretty open to, I guess the premise of our thought was the trustees did a lot of work on this, and there was probably a lot of hand-wringing over this, and other national teeth. And so we just appreciate the effort that went into it. And so that was our main sentiment. There's a few minor tweaks that we could see maybe, that have been addressed as far as just language. And we didn't know if that could be addressed with the church council or if that needs to be addressed before it goes. But none of that was something that we felt like made or break how we felt. I mean, the biggest question in part for us was what I think has been brought up is that what is the responsibility of the pastor? Can the associate pastor approve a marriage, or does it have to then go to the senior pastor? Is there anything that when determining? I mean, the beauty of our system, our itinerant system, is if we don't like somebody, if we didn't like how we just kick them out. But I'm not trying to say anything, but I'm just saying that we as a community are in charge, and I do love that. I think we love that about this church. However, the senior pastor would be holding a lot of responsibility in the way that it's currently written, and so there was just questions about that. I don't think we had any. We didn't have any objections, more just questions about that.
Hey, Dave, you use all your time.
Like the rest of you, we had some dissension, and we did not all agree. I think one of the general things we came up with, though, that because of the policy and disagreements among each other and our church, we don't want to lose people because of it, because that could happen. We all felt the policy was very fair. It again needs tweaking, and I think we've all said that. What is an active member? What do we mean by discretion of the pastor? And it is a huge responsibility. But we want it to be fair and equitable. Whatever we come up with, that it applies to everyone in the same way. And we were all just glad we didn't have to do it.
Well, we really didn't have much dissension in our group. We had a lot of good conversation, but we pretty much agreed. The policy is a good beginning, but it's ambiguous. And, if it's a policy, it needs to kind of be nailed down, 1, 2, 3 specifically. And it really doesn't address the central issue of homosexuality or LGBTQ, whatever alphabet we use. Which, face it, is kind of at the bottom of all of this. And we also felt like the pastor had too much responsibility when we kept saying, oh, that's at the discretion of the pastor, like several of y'all said. That's it.
You saved the best for last. Well, I'll be brief. We've hashed this out pretty good. We had some diversion and thoughts to start with, but the interesting thing was the longer we discussed, the more we sort of came together in more of a common feeling, I think. But our thoughts basically were to increase the pastor's discretion, that having a black and white rule, it's too exclusionary in a time when we're trying to point more people back to the church, that you're maybe turning people away from the church. And that some of the considerations were military families,
And one of the other things that I think is not really been brought up that much, but couples who were baptized in Christian families and raised in Christian families, they may be young people off at school or they've been in the military or someplace and they have not been active in a church, but doesn't mean they have not had a Christian background. And so I think that the pastor, through their conversation and counseling, can discern whether they're appropriate couple or candidate for marriage. And so in that line of thinking, we would increase the pastor's discretion. The end.
All right. Oh, did I not tell us that?
I was at the auditing table back there, and we were auditing this class. I got here late, and no, I just wanted to say I'll use half the time. I've always thought that the primary strength, one of the main strengths of our church, is our diversity in the ministries that we do. And when all this came about this affiliation, it became a ripping point where it's either you're with us or you're with them. And now we're to a point where we have to discern what the best chance, what the best opportunity to protect our church is from outside entities who might use our church for their social agenda platforms. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what the trustees have done, keeping it where it's not about homosexual marriage. It's about you have to be part of us if you're going to get married in our church. It makes sense. We're not going to agree on whether we should do homosexual marriages because we're diverse that way. And I think this is a big distraction that we should put aside and go ahead and pass this for the protection of the church and go on and do our ministry. Go ahead and just keep doing what we're doing above and beyond.
All right. Well, I know I promised you all we'll be out at 8, but we're on camera time, so it's a little bit after 8. But I feel like we've done some really, really good work. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here. Thank you for the courage you had in expressing what you needed to say and your point of view. And just a reminder, y'all, we didn't assign you to tables. You picked numbers. We didn't know who you were going to be sitting with. And to see the diversity just around your table, right? You can appreciate the trustees' hard work and difficulty in putting this together. So as we come to the close of our time, together, I would invite you to, if you want to spend some more time, go look over the notes over here, make a check mark with maybe those points that you resonate with. And then I invite you to bring your little sheet of paper that said, "This is what I love about Sierra Vista," and put it on the sticky pad right here. So that's all we're asking you to do. Again, did we solve everything? No. But we had a conversation, and we'll continue to have a conversation. Pastor College, maybe do.
So we're not quite finished. I'm asking everybody to pay attention just a second more, because we're going to ask God's blessing upon this night, upon the work that we've done, upon the work that we hope to continue to do as a church. And so I want to thank you for being here. My heart is heavy for a lot of different reasons, but it's heavy because I see the love that we have for each other, and I am desperate for us to maintain that. And I've only been here for a year, a little over a year. I can't imagine what some of you who have been part of this church for so long, the love that you have for this place and for these people, and it is just all of our desire that we move forward together. And so let's go to God and thank Him for the night, and ask the Spirit to continue to guide us. So let's pray. God, we thank you so much for your presence here with us this night. We thank you so much that your Spirit guided our conversations. We thank you that we could speak openly what we feel you have placed upon our hearts, knowing that we were going to disagree with somebody sitting across the table, but also knowing, God, that we weren't going to be judged for that we weren't going to be condemned for that. Because, God, everywhere we go in the world, we are judged and we are condemned based on what we feel or speak out loud. So we thank you for giving us a place where it's safe to speak and to just seek after you and after your will for our church. We ask that your Holy Spirit will continue to fill us and fuel us and enable us as your church to do the work that you have for us. We thank you